Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you by Coca-Cola, serving Alaskans quality soft drinks since 1937. By Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, an Alaska Native corporation promoting economic and social progress for people throughout the state. By the generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board. And Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by the Public Information Office of the North Slope Borough.
We are one people under one sky, with separate languages and ways. We are the heartbeat of Alaska. We open our hearts to you and welcome you to Heartbeat Alaska.
Welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeanie Greene, bringing you Native news across the North. Today's program is filled with news from the villages in Alaska. John Active won't be with us this week. He will return with a 10-minute segment next week. Today we visit the Aleut community of St. George, located on St. George Island in the Bering Sea. We talk with Reggie Joule about a training center located in Kotzebue. We have news from all over the state. Gary Fife is with us with Native news across the nation. But first, a story that is very important to me. Carbon monoxide is the single leading cause of toxin-related deaths in the United States. Last year, there were 3,800 accidental and suicidal deaths from carbon monoxide poisoning. Gloria Peck and Daryle Peck died recently from carbon monoxide poisoning. Their death was an accident. Gloria and Daryle Peck died together at their home in Elko, Nevada, of carbon monoxide poisoning. Though they lived in Nevada, they were truly Alaskans. Mrs. Peck was born November 13th in 1934 in Teller to Percy and May Blatchford. She attended Teller schools and Mount Edgecombe High School. Gloria's husband Daryle was born August 8th, 1934 in Spokane, Washington. He attended schools in Washington State and Idaho. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless, non-irritating gas. It's readily absorbed into the lungs, acting as a competitive inhibitor of oxygen. Mr. and Mrs. Peck perished together in their home. It was reported that they both fell ill before they perished. Initial symptoms commonly include headache, dizziness, weakness, and nausea. Carbon monoxide poisoning is often misdiagnosed as the flu, gastroenteritis, or psychiatric disorders. The family of Gloria and Daryle wish to warn others of the potential tragedy of CO poisoning, the poisoning that stole the lives of these once vital and still much loved people.
Dad was working for a gold mine out in Nevada, Elko, Nevada. And it was, I guess he'd been out there about 5-6 years now. And they had so much respect for him that this is unheard of, but they shut the mine down the day of the service, funeral service for them. And they bussed him in. And they had so much respect for Dad, and he had a way about him that would just bring out the best in every man. I mean, it was just amazing what he could do. He was a general foreman, pit foreman there. I guess they did call him a general foreman at the time. And
working in the kitchen.
In her dirty kitchen. Making Wyler and I some decaf coffee.
Mom helped around with the elderly. She did senior citizens. She would go up to the home, and she did this all on her own.
Beside Leslie Peck, Gloria and Daryle had 3 other children, Ruby Karen Hollenbeck, Ronald Lee Peck, and Dwayne Allen Peck.
So she just went for it, and she helped many, many people out. It was totally fascinating to see the amount of people came up that told us how Mom nursed them back to health, or other kids that I went to school with have children now, and how they were saying how Mom was more of a grandmother to those kids than their real grandmothers.
And hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim my God.
Them going together was the only way it could have been for both of them. They could not have lived without each other.
To receive information on carbon monoxide detectors, please contact the American Lung Association. Gloria Peck and Daryle Peck were my aunt and uncle. We'll be back with Gary Fife and Native News across the nation right after these messages.
Do you know a Native American?
Maybe you rode in one lately.
Maybe you drank one last night.
Seen one on the Late Late Show?
Cheered for one lately?
Maybe you've been to a sweat.
Smoke 'em peace pipe.
Come on, man, times have changed.
Free your mind.
From Yakutat to Barrow, Alaska newspapers publish news that makes a difference in your community. Information about events and activities that is timely, accurate, and dependable. Stories about people who make the news in your community. Stories about world events that affect your community. And stories that reflect the diversity of all Alaskans. If it makes a difference in your community, you can read about it in an Alaska newspaper. Subscribe now.
Up next is Gary Fife with Native News across the nation.
This is Native News across the nation. I'm Gary Fife. The picture for Native American programs slated for Clinton administration budget cuts has become more clear. Indian Country USA reports that economic development efforts through the Bureau of Indian Affairs are marked for elimination. As reported earlier, the BIA budget request for fiscal year 1995 was set at $2.24 billion, just slightly down from last year's request. On the chopping block are the direct loan program, the technical assistance grants, and the economic development programs. Tribal courts programs will take a hit if this budget gets approved on Capitol Hill. That program would lose almost $1.5 million. Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Ada Deer says the 1995 budget request continues the shift of responsibilities from the federal to the tribal governments. A deal between New Mexico's Mescalero Apache tribe and a utility company in Minnesota has drawn some fire from the local Native and environmentalist communities in Minnesota. Northern States Power Company and the Apaches have signed an agreement to establish a private facility to store used fuel from commercial nuclear power plants. Reports from print and broadcast sources say Mescalero Tribal President Wendell Chino says the plan's in keeping with their efforts to achieve tribal economic self-sufficiency. The tribe has accepted federal money to study such a plan in the past, but there have been protests against the tribe's efforts. Northern States Power has sought to store their spent fuel locally, but has met opposition there. Tribal sources say they've studied a plan for a monitored retrieval storage site for years and have approved the idea. Under terms of this agreement, however, a full tribal vote must be taken before a final agreement is approved. The Ute tribe in Utah has decided that it was time to start exercising some of its water rights and collect some back rents on consumers of tribal water allocations. It sent a bill to the Utah Water Conservancy District for $33 million. That's how much they say they're owed for water diverted from Rock Creek into the Strawberry Reservoir system since June of 1989. And now Tribal Business Council members are discussing leasing surplus reservation water to the city of Las Vegas. Local state officials say they've been trying to work out some arrangement for the Ute water rights, but admit the tribe has not chosen to accept their offers. A North Dakota tribe has received a hefty financial helping hand from the government to provide some programs for tribal youth. The Fort Berthold Tribal Housing Authority got $125,000 to offer healthy alternatives through its Youth Council. The Youth Council has planned a series of alcohol and drug-free and Indian and Proud workshops and forums, counseling services, vocational and educational trainings, plus sports. The Fort Berthold program was chosen out of 89 tribal applications and scored the highest out of 9 awards that were given out. And finally, the knowledge of traditional elders has been shared this week for some Alaska Natives. The 1994 Bering Straits Elders Conference was hosted this week in Nome, Alaska. The Kowarik Elders Advisory Committee chose the theme, "To Our Way of Life, Let Us Return, a Reawakening." The Elders Conference shared topics linked to survival and their families in the Arctic. Among those sessions were lessons in traditional ways of watching the weather, traditional and Western spiritual beliefs, and Native family systems then and now. Besides the serious study of the workshops, each evening was set aside for some fun with Eskimo singing and dancing. And this is Native News Across the Nation. For Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Gary Fife.
Thank you, Gary. We travel now to Kotzebue, Alaska, where there's a training center. Reggie Joule knows all about it. The fact that Reggie Joule is involved in education is no surprise. He's the grandson of Tony Joule, who adopted Reggie Joule and made him his son. Tony Joule was an Inupiat man who for 40 years dedicated his life to educating Native people across the North. So, it comes naturally to Reggie. For 15 years, he promoted, taught, organized, and participated in the Native traditional games in the World Eskimo Indian Olympics. He even appeared on Johnny Carson's show twice, as well as on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel, not promoting himself, but rather teaching the world about our Native cultures. His role today has changed somewhat, but not his motivation. The bottom line, he cares about his Native people.
Kotzebue's real name is Kikiktakruk, which means a place that's almost an island. And Audubon Kotzebue stopped by there, I think in 1816. But prior to that, it served as a trading hub because of its location. People from the river systems, the Notak, Kobuk, Selawik river systems, from the north, from the south, would congregate at Kotzebue, Sisolik, in that area in the springtime to hunt and to trade for sea mammals, because we depend and still depend quite heavily on the seal oil and the sea mammals that are available there. And so people from the river communities or from the inland communities would come down and bring us some of their furs, their fish from their areas, and trade it for oil and meat and those kinds of things. And so there was a lot of bartering that went on there. And when you get a gathering like that, it's just a natural thing for people to celebrate. And especially after you've had a successful season. And so that's what people would do. And that's basically what came to be known as the Northwest Native Trade Fair. It's not something that we just put on, it's something that has happened for years.
Reggie Joule travels the state of Alaska, recruiting people for training at the Alaska Technical Center located in Kotzebue. The rural location, according to Joule, is an advantage.
We're the only, I think, residential training facility up north. What makes us different? Well, number one, we're located in a rural area. And we're smaller than Seward. We're smaller than Palmer, the Job Corps Center out there. And I think that really works to our advantage because our instructors are able to give a lot more personalized instruction. People's knowledge or the experience and the learning that's gained is more in depth. Our classes are a little smaller. And I think in that way, that makes us a lot different than some of the other schools. It's a vocational technical school where we offer 3 main programs. We have office occupations, which is, and under office occupations is a 14-week clerk receptionist program. In addition to the office occupations is the health occupations where the trainees, the students can gain skills and be certified as a nurse's assistant. The third of our core programs is a building industrial technology, and that consists of 5 segments. There's a 14-week principles of technology, followed by 7 weeks of construction trades, 7 weeks of plumbing, understanding plumbing systems, followed by 9 weeks of electrical systems and 9 weeks of boilers and burners. And these skills give our students entry level, gives them knowledge to enter the world of work at an entry level with a background knowing a little bit of all of these areas for building maintenance. The school also does a whole variety of short courses, short workshops. Right now we're just finishing up a 3-week vessel licensing preparation.
What is that?
It's a Coast Guard preparatory class to license individuals who are going to haul individuals or cargo around commercially for, and so it licenses the boat drivers. It licenses, in some cases, the boats. Some of the boats need to be inspected. And we have people from, right now, from as far away as Bethel and Akiak, as well as those individuals right in town in Unalakleet. We've done some aircraft maintenance with University of Alaska Anchorage. And some of the footage that you're going to be seeing on the Tech Center was provided by one of the instructors of University of Alaska's aircraft maintenance program, George Miller of Takotna Video. The best thing that an individual can do if they're looking at going out and pursuing vocational training in the areas that I mentioned would be to call that 800 number. Get an application in soon and start the ball rolling, because right now,
Reggie's been traveling all over the state informing people about the training center. Says he's never had so much fun. I'm so glad for him. We turn now to the community of St. George on St. George Island.
The island of St. George is located in the Bering Sea, It's one of the Pribilof Islands. This was not always the Pribilofs. This used to be the Aleut hunting ground. Pribilof was a Russian businessman. He came to this area to get fur seals. It was rumored that Pribilof had accidentally overheard an old Aleut story about the son of an Unimak chief who many years before had found the fur seal islands by being blown north of Unimak. In the late 18th century, the navigators of the 60 different Russian companies searched the North Pacific and Bering Sea for the land of the fur seals. Since the 1700s, the Russians had been responsible for the deaths of thousands of Aleuts. They stole their furs and destroyed their homes. The Russian hunters who settled on the Pribilof Islands were an unruly, ungovernable group of men. Each hunter owed the merchant who had sponsored him a predetermined number of furs. Anything he caught above that number, he could keep as his own. The Russian invasion of the Aleutian Islands began on the evening of September 9th, 1741, when a Russian ship silently appeared on the Aleut horizon and entered Adak Harbor unannounced. They had come to the islands to collect furs. Attu was the first Aleutian island to be captured and its people enslaved by the Russians. The Aleuts eventually revolted and much blood was shed. In the summer of 1796, several Aleut leaders made the 5,000-mile journey to St. Petersburg, the capital of Russia at the time. They went to protest against the behavior of the Russian hunters before the Russian Tsar, Paul I. Prior to this, in early June in 1786, Pribilof and his Russian hunters on the ship the St. George found the island now known as St. George. Recently, the community of St. George had a retirement potluck for one of the community leaders of the land corporation, called the Tanak Corporation. Mr. Anthony B. Merculief had been the president for almost 10 years. This was a night of celebration. There's only over 2,000 Aleuts left in the world. So during the celebration, when Mr. Philemonof spoke in Aleut, it's a sound that is very precious to our ears.
So, anjektur, we have this now we know. Inachigali. Ning we stood to Maka, the Hunam to Num, Waya Hawoktali, to Loktali, Alokta Skali.
Thank you so much, Diane McGlashan from St. George for that video. And also to Dmitry Philemonof for the information and Boris Merculief. We turn now to some messages and then to Elise Patkotak from Barrow.
Ice skating was something I always did on my ankles. It just seemed easier to give myself a slightly broader base than that narrow blade allowed. By using this method, I was often able to make it around the rink at least once before going into a slow-motion, gentle split that left me skating on my face, an even broader surface. Every winter, they'd lay down an ice rink in Atlantic City's convention hall for general use. I'd haul my skates out and go there, determined that this year I'd figure out how to skate on the blade. I'd head out on the ice using every muscle in my body to keep my feet upright. About halfway through the first turn, I'd feel my ankles bending. I never really understood how my ankle bone could be quite so flexible. I thought it should have a little more strength to hold me upright. But slowly and inexorably, even after I drew my breath in as tightly as I could to lift my entire body off my ankle, I'd feel it touching the ice. Suddenly I'd gain speed and grace. I'd whirl around the rink. Skating on my ankles just seemed to work so much better. These thoughts are wandering through my mind now because I've recently come back from Anchorage, where I was privileged to watch some budding Dorothy Hamels skating in competition. Of course, these competitions are not quite the same as what you saw in the Olympics, but in many ways it's all the more entertaining for being local and personal. For one thing, there are kids out there skating who look as though they're barely old enough to be crawling. And of course, the fact that they're skating on the blade and not their ankle continues to thoroughly intrigue me. The other thing that makes it so much fun is that these kids are not all Olympic material. Most of them are out there having fun, learning about healthy things, about competition and poise. Parents line the railings with anxious faces and video cameras. Dads sit in the bleachers eating hot dogs and stuffed potatoes. Siblings run around downing nachos. It's families together having good times. The good times their kids will remember with a smile when they grow up. It's a hallmark moment without the schmaltz. The end result may not be the Olympics for most of these kids, but it will be a sense of family, a sense of the good times families can share. Even winning a gold medal at the Olympics can't beat that.
Thank you so much for joining me for another Heartbeat Alaska. Next week, we'll have John Active back with his news in the North Slope Borough, plus news from all over the state. Don't forget to send me the video. See you then.
Look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze. Then sings my soul, Savior God, to thee.